The great hall of the alien council was silent. Only the sound of metal doors closing echoed through the cold chamber. High above, banners of two rival species hung side by side. One blue, one crimson, colors that never mixed before. Rows of alien leaders sat in a half circle, their glowing eyes fixed on the center stage where the pact was about to be sealed. The air was heavy, every breath thick with fear and duty. At the center stood a young alien woman, her wrists bound in silver bands. She was tall and graceful, with silver lines glowing faintly across her dark skin, but her eyes told another story. Eyes full of sorrow and silent protest. She was chosen to be the bond sacrifice, her life traded to end a war she had never fought. The council called it honor, but to her it was a prison without walls. Humans were allowed to watch the ceremony, a show of peace between species. Most of them stood quietly at the back, stiff and silent, afraid to break any sacred rule. But one man did not look away. He was not a leader, not a soldier, just an engineer sent to maintain the machines in the hall. His name was Daniel, and his eyes kept searching her face, watching her pain like it was carved into his own chest. The alien speaker raised his staff, his voice loud and sharp. Today we seal the Pact of Unity. She will belong to the House of the Crimson Empire, bound by oath and by blood. Her heart no longer her own, the crowd murmured. Some cheered. Others lowered their heads. The young woman's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Silence was demanded of her. Silence was survival. Daniel's fists tightened. He had fixed broken engines. He had repaired shattered walls, but he had never seen something so cruel past his law. He whispered under his breath, "This is not peace. This is chains." No one heard him, or maybe they chose not to. Only the woman's eyes seemed to flicker as if she felt the words across the air. The ceremony moved forward. Alien guards stepped closer to her, each step making the hall feel smaller. She glanced at the crowd, searching for a face that might pity her, but all turned away, all except one human. Daniel did not bow his head. He did not pretend to agree. His gaze stayed locked on her, and in that silent stare, a dangerous spark was born. It was the first thread of defiance in a hall full of obedience. The chief counselor lifted the ancient seal, a glowing ring meant to bind her name forever into the pact. A servant carried it toward her, the glow reflected in her tearful eyes. For a moment she swayed, her body trembling as though she would collapse. The crowd saw only weakness, but Daniel saw something else. He saw a silent cry for help. Inside his chest, his heart pounded. He wanted to shout, he wanted to run forward, but he knew one wrong move could mean his death. The law was clear, no outsider could interfere. No human could question the pact. Still, he felt his body tense like a storm was gathering inside him. It was not love yet, but it was the seed of it. Born in that single moment of injustice, the counselor's voice thundered again. Let this pact be unbroken. Let her sacrifice be remembered as the bridge between two empires. The crowd bowed. The drums began to beat, and the hall shook with sound. Daniel's jaw clenched. His thoughts screamed louder than the drums. If no one stops this, she will be lost forever. The young woman closed her eyes as the seal came closer. Her lips moved silently. No one heard her words, but Daniel read them like fire. Please, someone. His breath caught, his heart froze, and in that instant he knew he would not let this pact chain her, even if it meant breaking every rule carved into the stars. The moment burned into him. The hall seemed endless, but also fragile. The pact was law, but laws could be broken, and hearts could not be silenced forever. Daniel did not yet move, but the choice had already been made inside him, and when a human makes a choice, no empire can truly stop it. The drums kept beating. The pact was moments away, but somewhere in the shadows of that hall, fate had already shifted. Not in the hands of the council, not in the glow of the seal, but in the quiet defiance of one human's heart. And that was the beginning of everything. The night after the pact announcement was heavy and cold. The alien palace glowed under silver moons, but inside the chamber where the young woman was kept, only shadows moved across the walls. She sat on the stone bench, her wrists still sore from the silver bands, the echo of drums from the ceremony still ringing in her head. She had not spoken a word since, not to the guards, not to the council, not even to herself, for her silence had become her shield. But deep inside she wanted to scream. She wanted someone to hear. Her name was Soraya. Though the council had called her only the sacrifice, stripping away her identity as if it were nothing, she pressed her hands against the cold wall, eyes shut, whispering so faintly that even she could barely hear, Why me? Why my life? Her voice trembled, and a tear rolled down, disappearing into the dust on the floor. Across the hallways, Daniel walked slowly, pretending to check the mechanical systems he had been assigned to maintain. His tools clinked softly at his side, but his real purpose was elsewhere. His mind replayed the moment he had seen her eyes. That silent cry that no one else dared to acknowledge. He could not forget it. He could not walk away like the rest. The guards stood at the doors of her chamber, tall figures in crimson armor, their faces hidden behind dark masks. They barely glanced at Daniel. To them, he was only a worker, an unimportant human fixing wires and machines. But Daniel moved carefully, every step measured, until the guards finally turned away to speak among themselves. In that brief moment, he slipped inside the shadows of the chamber. Soraya lifted her head quickly, startled by the sound of the door opening. Her eyes widened when she saw the human, his rough uniform dusty, his face serious yet kind. "You," she whispered, her voice sharp with fear. "What are you doing here? If they see you, they will kill you." Daniel raised his hand gently, his tone calm. "I couldn't stay away. I had to see if you were all right." She laughed bitterly, a sound broken by sorrow. "All right, I am chained to a fate I never chose. Tomorrow they will bind me forever to an empire I do not love. And you ask if I am all right." Daniel stepped closer, his heart heavy at her words. "I know I cannot change the pact tonight, but no one should face this alone." Soraya's eyes searched his face, uncertain if he was foolish or brave. "You risk death just by speaking to me. Why?" "Because," he whispered, "I saw the tears you could not show them, and no one should be left unseen." For a moment, silence filled the room. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of two souls hearing each other for the first time. Soraya lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. "They call it honor, but it feels like chains crushing me. I want to scream, but if I do, they will punish not just me but my family." Her voice cracked, and tears streamed freely now. The tears she had hidden before the council. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to hold her, but he did not dare, not yet. "I can't promise you freedom tonight," he said softly. "But I promise you this, you are not invisible. Not to me." Her lips parted, her eyes shone with a fragile spark. Something between disbelief and hope. It was dangerous, more dangerous than either could admit. But that spark was enough to make her breathe a little lighter. She whispered, "If they find you here, you will die." Daniel nodded. "Then let me die for something real. Not just machines and orders." The torchlight flickered, shadows moved outside the door. Both froze, hearts pounding. The guards passed by, their heavy steps echoing, but they did not enter. The danger faded as quickly as it had come. Soraya let out a shaky breath, her eyes wide with terror. "You see, even the walls have ears." "We cannot do this." Daniel leaned closer, his voice firm now. "Maybe we cannot change everything, but we can start with one thing. You do not cry alone tonight." Her tears fell again, but this time they carried less despair. They carried release. She pressed her hand against her heart, whispering, "You should not be here, and yet if you had not come, I think I would have broken." Daniel finally let his hand brush against hers, only for a second, but the warmth was enough to bind a silent promise. "I will not let them destroy you, Soraya," he said, his words like a vow. The chamber grew colder as the night deepened, but inside those walls a fragile warmth grew. Two souls bound not by law, not by council decree, but by something far stronger and far more dangerous. Soraya closed her eyes, whispering into the darkness, "Then maybe, just maybe, I can survive tomorrow." And Daniel knew in that moment that his path was no longer his own. His heart had chosen rebellion. The moons rose high above the alien city, their pale light spilling across the ancient stone walls. The streets below were quiet, guarded by soldiers in crimson armor, yet even silence carried danger in a place where eyes always watched. Soraya sat in her chamber, the weight of the silver bands pressing against her skin, her thoughts a storm she could not calm. Her body was still, but her spirit screamed for freedom. Daniel moved through the corridors like a shadow, his tools strapped to his side to maintain his cover. He had told himself he would stay away after the risk he had taken the night before. But the memory of Soraya's tears haunted him. Every step he took was reckless, every breath defiance, yet his heart pushed him forward. He could not forget her words, he could not ignore her pain. When the guards finally rotated their posts, Daniel slipped quietly into the chamber once more. Soraya's eyes widened when she saw him, her lips parting in shock. You should not be here if they catch you. They will kill you without hesitation. Daniel closed the door softly, his voice steady. Then let them, but I will not stand outside while you suffer alone. Her chest rose and fell quickly, torn between fear and something else she dared not name. The chamber was dark except for the dim torch burning in the corner. Shadows stretched across the stone, long and sharp like prison bars. Daniel moved closer, his voice a whisper. Tomorrow they will bind you before the council again, won't they? Soraya lowered her head, her silver hair falling like a curtain over her face. Yes, tomorrow they seal my life forever. The silence between them grew heavy, a silence filled with all the words neither dared to speak. Soraya finally looked up, her eyes trembling. Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for me? You do not even know me. Daniel's voice carried the weight of truth. I don't need to know every detail. I only know what I saw. Someone being forced into chains, someone crying out with no one to answer, and I could not turn away. Her lips trembled, but her heart beat faster. She had never heard such words from anyone, not even her own people. The air thickened with danger when footsteps echoed outside. Voices of guards patrolling. Daniel quickly pulled her into the corner behind a heavy curtain. Their bodies pressed close in the narrow space. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded so loud she feared the guards would hear it. They stood frozen as the soldiers passed by, their laughter sharp, their armor clinking, unaware of the secret just beyond the curtain. When the voices faded, Soraya realized how close Daniel was, how his presence felt like both danger and safety at once. Do you see now? She whispered, her voice shaking. One mistake, and you will lose your life. Daniel looked into her eyes, his whisper fierce. Then let me lose it for something that matters, not for machines and silence. Her hands trembled as she whispered back. You are a fool, but maybe the kind of fool I needed. For the first time, Soraya allowed herself to smile, a weak and fragile smile, but real. Daniel felt his heart twist. He had never seen something so beautiful born in the middle of sorrow. They spoke softly after that, trading secrets like forbidden treasures. She told him of her childhood, of the river she once swam in before the wars, of the songs her mother sang that she would never hear again. He told her of Earth, of the fields of green and the sky that burned gold at sunset, of laughter in the streets where no pact could chain a soul. Their words became a bridge, each sentence stitching a thread between their worlds. Every whisper was dangerous, every memory a rebellion. But neither cared anymore. The more they spoke, the more Soraya felt her fear bend into something else. Something fragile yet powerful. Hope, she whispered. No one has ever listened to me the way you do. Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Because no one has ever seen you the way I do. A sound cracked the moment. The slam of a door far down the corridor. The shout of a soldier calling for inspection. Soraya's eyes filled with panic. You must leave now if they find you here. It will be the end for both of us. Daniel's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, but before leaving he reached for her hand, pressing it tightly for one heartbeat. Tomorrow they may chain you before the council. But remember this, you are not theirs, Soraya. Not while I breathe. Her breath caught as he slipped back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as he came. She sank to the floor, clutching her chest, his words burning brighter than any torch. For the first time since the pact was announced, her tears were not only of sorrow, they were also of fear mixed with an unfamiliar fire. Her lips moved, whispering into the empty chamber. Not while you breathe, Daniel. Then maybe I still have a chance. That night, the palace slept under heavy silence, but within its walls a forbidden meeting had changed everything. The pact still loomed, the council still held power, but a spark had been lit that no chain could smother. And though the galaxy itself might demand obedience, two hearts had already begun their rebellion. The sun rose over the alien city, its red light spilling across towers of black stone. The palace glimmered like fire under the dawn, but inside its walls shadows grew darker with secrets. Soraya's chamber felt smaller that morning, as if the very walls pressed closer. Whispering of danger, she paced restlessly, her hands brushing the silver bands on her wrists, her heart still burning with the memory of Daniel's words. But outside her chamber, others had begun to notice. The guards had seen the change in her eyes, how she no longer looked empty, how her silence now carried a spark of hidden defiance. One officer, sharp and jealous, narrowed his gaze whenever he saw her. He whispered to the others, "Something has shifted in her. Someone has dared to touch what belongs to the council. Daniel tried to move carefully that day, keeping his tools in hand, walking the halls like nothing had changed. But his eyes betrayed him each time he passed near Soraya's chamber. His head turned too quickly. His steps slowed too long. He could not hide the weight in his chest, the fire that had been lit inside him. And the jealous officer saw it, saw the way the human's gaze lingered where no gaze should. That night, Daniel slipped back into the shadows of the chamber. Soraya was waiting this time, her face pale with fear and hope mixed together. "You came again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They are watching." "I can feel it," Daniel shook his head, his voice low but firm. "Let them watch. They will see nothing but lies. They will not hear what passes between us." They sat close in the dim torchlight, speaking softly, trading whispers like stolen treasure. For a moment, Soraya allowed herself to forget the chains, to forget the council, to imagine a world where her choices were her own. Daniel told her of Earth again, of rivers and skies that belonged to no empire. She listened with wide eyes, her hands trembling as if she could almost feel the wind he described. But danger crept closer than they knew. The jealous officer had followed Daniel, keeping to the shadows of the corridor. He pressed himself against the cold wall, his ears straining, his eyes fixed on the door to Soraya's chamber. He could not hear their words, but he saw the flicker of torchlight, saw the faint shadow of two figures instead of one. Inside, Soraya suddenly tensed, her instincts sharp. "Someone is near," she whispered, her voice urgent. "We must hide." Daniel's heart raced. He scanned the room, then pulled her toward the far corner, behind a cracked stone pillar where shadows swallowed them. They pressed close together, breaths shallow. As footsteps approached outside, the door creaked open slightly. The jealous officer peered inside, his eyes narrow, his suspicion burning like poison. Soraya held her breath, her body rigid with fear. Daniel's hand brushed hers, steadying her in the darkness. The officer scanned the chamber, his gaze sweeping past the torch, the bench, the walls. But he saw nothing unusual. At last he muttered under his breath and closed the door, his footsteps fading into the hall. Only then did Soraya collapse against the wall, her chest rising and falling quickly. Her voice broke. "Do you see now, Daniel? One mistake and they will destroy us both." Daniel's hand rested gently on her shoulder, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "Then we cannot afford mistakes, but I will not leave you. Not now." Her eyes filled with tears, not only of fear, but of something stronger. Trust. The torch flickered again, shadows danced across their faces. Soraya whispered, "You risk everything, but why? Why for me?" Daniel met her gaze, his voice low. "Because in a hall full of silence, you were the only one who cried. And I was the only one who heard." Her lips trembled. Her eyes shone with a fragile light, and for the first time she whispered his name. "Daniel." Their closeness was no longer just defiance. It was a promise. Every secret word, every hidden touch was a step deeper into danger. But neither could turn back now. The risk had become the only path left to them. And though the council ruled with fear, though the pact weighed like chains, the bond growing between them was stronger. Outside, the jealous officer walked quickly to the higher chambers, his suspicion burning into certainty. He bowed before the chief counselor, his voice cold. "The human is not loyal. He has been near the girl more than once. I will find proof." "I swear it," the counselor's eyes narrowed, his voice like steel. "Bring me the proof, and I will make the human an example. No one breaks the pact." The officer bowed again, his smile hidden behind the mask. Back in the chamber, Soraya shivered, though the night was not cold. She whispered into the silence, "They will come for us. I can feel it." Daniel leaned closer, his voice a vow. "Then let them come, but they will not take you without facing me first." And in that moment, their rebellion was no longer secret in their hearts. It was a storm waiting to break. The risk of discovery was no longer a shadow. It was already upon them. But in the danger, their love grew stronger. A fragile flame daring to burn against the council's iron will. And when a flame burns in the dark, it can spread faster than fear itself. The day of the binding ceremony arrived with heavy drums echoing across the alien city. The palace gates opened wide, and crowds of both humans and aliens filled the grand hall, their voices hushed with expectation. Tall torches burned along the walls, their flames flickering like restless spirits. At the center of the hall stood the binding circle, carved with glowing runes. ancient symbols of law and control. Soraya was brought forward, her silver bands polished so that they gleamed under the torchlight. Her face was pale but steady, though inside her chest her heart raced with dread. She walked slowly, every step feeling like the closing of a cage. The council sat high above on their thrones, their eyes cold, waiting to seal her fate. Daniel stood among the crowd, his hands shaking at his sides. He had promised himself he would stay hidden, that he would not risk her life or his own. But as he watched her climb the steps toward the circle, his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. Each beat of the drum struck him like a hammer, and he knew he could not remain silent. The counselor raised his staff, his voice booming through the hall. Today we bind her to the Crimson Empire. Today we honor the pact. Today we prove that unity comes with sacrifice, the crowd murmured. Some clapped, others lowered their heads, but Soraya's eyes searched desperately through the faces. And when they found Daniel, her heart trembled with both fear and hope. The servant carried the glowing seal forward, its light casting long shadows. Soraya's lips quivered as she whispered so faintly that only she could hear. Please, not like this. Daniel's fists clenched, his body trembling as he fought with himself, and then, as the servant lifted the seal above her hands, Daniel stepped forward. Gasps filled the hall. Whispers spread like wildfire. The guards shifted, their hands reaching for weapons. But Daniel's voice cut through the noise, strong and shaking. Stop, he shouted, his voice echoing. This is no unity, this is slavery. Every eye turned toward him, humans and aliens alike frozen in disbelief. The counselor's face darkened, his voice sharp as a blade. Human. You dare interrupt sacred law? Daniel stepped closer, his heart pounding but his voice steady. I dare because I see what you will not. She is not a sacrifice. She is a living being with a will, with a heart, with the right to choose. His words rang out bold and reckless, yet filled with truth that could not be ignored. Soraya's chest tightened, tears filled her eyes. Not of sorrow, but of something she had not felt in years. Someone fighting for her. She whispered his name under her breath. Daniel. The guards moved quickly, their boots striking the stone floor, their weapons drawn. But Daniel did not step back. He stood tall, his eyes locked on the council, his defiance burning like fire. The hall erupted into chaos. Some in the crowd shouted for his death. Others murmured in shock. The humans in the back stood frozen, fear painted on their faces. But Daniel's voice rose again above the noise. If you call this peace, then your peace is a lie. If you call this unity, then your unity is chains. His words shook the silence of centuries, daring to break what no one else had ever broken. The counselor slammed his staff against the floor, the sound cracking like thunder. Seize him, he roared. Let this be the price of rebellion. Guards rushed forward, their blades gleaming under torchlight. Soraya cried out, her voice breaking. No! Stop. But her cry was drowned in the roar of the hall. Daniel fought as they grabbed him, his arms twisted but his spirit unbroken. He shouted even as they dragged him down. She is not yours, she will never belong to you. She's more than a pact, more than a chain. The crowd gasped, some turning away, unable to watch, others staring in awe at the human who dared defy the council. Soraya's tears fell freely now, but her eyes shone with fire, a fire that had been buried deep inside her heart until this moment. The counselor's face was cold, his voice merciless. You will die for this, human, and let your death remind all who dare to resist. Daniel's chest heaved with pain, but his eyes never wavered from Soraya's. I would rather die than see you bound to chains, he said, his voice trembling with both fear and truth. And in that moment something shifted in the hall, as if the very walls trembled with the weight of his words. Soraya stepped forward, pulling against the guards who held her. Her voice rang clear and strong, echoing across the chamber. Then I choose, she declared, her voice breaking the silence like a blade. I choose him. The hall froze, every whisper silenced, every breath stolen. The counselor's eyes widened, fury flashing across his face. But it was too late. The breaking point had come. A single human had defied the pact, and the one bound by it had spoken the unthinkable. Together in that moment they shattered centuries of silence with love. The hall shook with Soraya's words, her voice still echoing in the silence. I choose him, she had cried, and those 3 words split the air like a blade through stone. The crowd gasped, some shouted in disbelief, others whispered as if they had just witnessed an unforgivable sin. The guards froze for only a moment, then tightened their grip on Daniel. dragging him toward the center of the circle. The chief counselor's face was thunder, his glowing eyes narrowing with fury. "You dare defy sacred law," he thundered. "You dare spit on the pact made by blood and sacrifice." Soraya pulled against her guards, her chains rattling. "It is no sacrifice if it steals my soul, no pact if it crushes my will." Her voice trembled, but it carried strength she had never shown before. Daniel's breath came heavy as the guards forced him to his knees, yet his eyes remained fixed on her, unwavering, burning with the same fire that had made him speak in the first place. The counselor slammed his staff against the floor, the sound cracking through the hall. "Then let there be no delay. The trial of law will judge your rebellion, and you will both pay the price," the crowd murmured, some eager, some fearful. The trial of law was no ordinary judgment. It was the ancient test of truth, where words and hearts were stripped bare before all. It was not meant for love, but for loyalty and obedience. And now it would decide the fate of a human and an alien woman who dared to love each other. The guards shoved Daniel into the circle, forcing Soraya to stand beside him. Her hands shook, her eyes filled with tears, but her chin lifted proudly. For the first time, she did not feel alone. Even though the whole hall burned with hatred around her, Daniel whispered softly, only for her, "Whatever happens, I am with you." The counselor raised the seal again, its glow brighter than fire. "Speak," he commanded, his voice sharp. "Do you deny this human touched your heart? Do you deny your choice?" Soraya's lips trembled, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down on her. But she straightened her back, her voice clear. "I deny nothing. I choose him, not your pact." "Not your chains!" Gasps echoed through the crowd like thunder. The counselor's hand shook with rage. "Then you are guilty of treason against your own kind." He turned his burning gaze on Daniel. "And you, human, are guilty of corrupting what was sacred, of breaking the rules of unity." Daniel raised his chin, his voice steady even as the guards pressed blades against his back. "If unity means chains, then I will break them every time." The council chamber erupted into chaos, voices clashing, some demanding blood, others whispering of courage. The drums beat again, slower now, heavier. Like the sound of judgment itself, the trial of law was about to begin. A test no human had ever faced, and yet Daniel stood firm, his hand brushing Soraya's as they stood side by side. The counselor spread his arms, his voice rising. "Then let the trial of love and defiance begin, before all gathered here, before the ancestors who watch from beyond." The torches flared higher, the circle glowed brighter, and in that terrible light, their souls would be weighed not by mercy, but by power. A guardian of the pack stepped forward, a towering figure in black armor, his eyes glowing like embers. He circled them slowly, his voice low but sharp. "Do you claim your bond is stronger than law, stronger than empire, stronger than fear?" Daniel's voice rang out. "Yes, because love cannot be chained." Soraya's voice joined his, trembling yet unyielding. "Yes, because I am not theirs to bind, I am my own. And I give myself freely." The guardian stopped, his head tilting as if measuring their words. The hall grew quiet, the weight of judgment pressing down like iron. For a long moment no one spoke. Only the flames crackled and the hearts of two rebels beat loud enough to fill the silence. Finally, the guardian stepped back, his voice heavy. "Then your fate will be decided not by words, but by fire." The counselor lifted his staff once more. "If your love is truth, the fire will not destroy you. If it is weakness, you will both burn." Soraya's hands trembled, but she reached for Daniel's, their fingers entwining in the glow of the circle. Her whisper barely carried. "If this is the end, then I end it with you." Daniel squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "No, this is not the end, it is the beginning." The circle flared, the flames rose, surrounding them in a ring of burning light. The crowd held its breath, watching, waiting. Soraya closed her eyes. Daniel held her hand tight, and together, they stood in defiance as the trial of love began. The flames roared high, encircling Daniel and Soraya like a living wall of fire. The crowd leaned forward, their eyes wide, some eager to see the rebels burn, others silent with fear and doubt. The counselor stood above them, his staff raised, his voice booming. "Let the fire reveal truth. Let it destroy the false." But Daniel did not move, his hand holding Soraya's with unshakable strength. The heat pressed against their skin, sparks dancing dangerously close. Soraya's knees trembled, but Daniel's grip steadied her, his voice calm though his heart pounded. "Don't let go," he whispered. "No matter what happens, don't let go," she nodded, her tears glistening in the glow. "I won't." The flames bent toward them, wrapping like snakes ready to strike. The crowd gasped, some covering their faces, others whispering prayers, but as the fire reached their bodies, something strange happened. The flames did not consume. They swirled around them, touching but not burning, dancing like ribbons of light. Soraya opened her eyes in shock, her voice shaking. "Daniel, the fire, it does not hurt." Daniel looked down at their joined hands, the glow around them brighter than the flames themselves. "It's because we are not false," he said, his voice trembling with awe. "It's because love cannot be burned." The hall erupted into chaos, voices shouting, some claiming witchcraft, others falling into stunned silence. The guardian of the pact stepped forward, his armored face unreadable, his voice carried heavy authority. "The fire accepts them," he said slowly. "Their bond is true." The counselor's eyes blazed with fury, his staff striking the floor so hard the stones cracked. "No," he roared. "The pact is law, stronger than fire, stronger than love. I will not allow this insult." He raised the staff again, its tip glowing with violent energy. The crowd cried out as he prepared to strike them down himself. But Soraya's voice rang out clear and defiant. "No more chains, no more silence. I am not your sacrifice." Her words cut through the hall like thunder, shaking even the hearts of those who had once cheered for her binding. Daniel stepped forward, pulling her with him, his voice rising. "You claim unity, but all you know is fear. You claim peace, but you only trade lives like stones." He turned to the crowd, his eyes burning. "Look at us, look at the truth. Love is stronger than your pact, stronger than your fear." The humans in the back straightened, whispers spreading quickly. Even some aliens lowered their heads, torn between loyalty to law and the undeniable sight before them. The counselor's rage twisted into desperation. "Guards, kill them both," he shouted. "End this madness now," but the guards hesitated, their weapons raised yet their steps uncertain, for they had seen the fire, they had seen the truth, and doubt had entered their hearts. The jealous officer snarled, pushing forward with his blade, but Daniel moved faster, his body surging with determination. He grabbed a fallen staff from the floor, blocking the strike, sparks flying as wood met steel. The officer staggered back, his anger drowned by the defiance burning in Daniel's eyes. Soraya pulled against her chains, her strength fierce, and with a sudden cry the silver bands cracked. The glow faded from her wrists, falling to the ground with a sharp clang. The hall froze in silence at the sound, for it was the first time the sacred chains had ever been broken. She raised her free hands high, her voice trembling but strong. "I am not your property, I am not your pawn. I am free," the crowd erupted, some shouting in outrage, others cheering with hope. The flames around them began to die down, leaving only the two of them standing tall in the circle. Daniel placed his hand over his heart, his voice steady. "I will protect her, no matter the cost, and if you come for us, you will face not just one man, but the truth you fear." Soraya stood beside him, her shoulders squared. "And I will never bow to your pact again." The counselor's face twisted with fury, but his power had slipped. The people had seen something they could not forget. Love standing unburned in the fire, chains shattering before their eyes. The whispers spread like a storm, carried through every corner of the hall. And though the council still roared for order, the rebellion had already begun. Daniel took Soraya's hand once more, and together they walked out of the circle, past the guards who dared not stop them. The crowd parted in silence, eyes wide, hearts beating with the weight of change. Every step they took was heavy with danger, yet brighter with hope, and when the great doors opened, the night air rushed in, cool and free. They did not know what awaited them outside, pursuit, exile, perhaps even war. But they knew one thing with certainty. They had broken the pact, not with weapons, but with love. And no empire, no council, no chain forged in fear could ever erase what had been born that night. The story of their defiance would spread across worlds, whispered in secret, shouted in rebellion, and in the galaxy's darkest halls others would remember that a human and an alien once stood together in fire and walked away unburned. Their love had become the spark, and the spark would grow into a flame no council could contain.